A rancher freed a captive Apache woman, and that day she said, "You will be my husband." The morning sun rose slowly over the wide, empty plains, casting a golden light over the ranch. The wind carried a faint smell of dust and grass, and the sound of cattle lowing in the distance filled the quiet air. On this lonely stretch of land, a rancher worked tirelessly every day, tending to his herd and maintaining the fences that marked the edges of his property. He had lived here for many years, and the isolation had taught him patience and self-reliance. Life on the frontier was never easy, but he had learned to find comfort in small routines and the rhythm of the land. That morning he saddled his horse and rode toward the far fields, checking on the livestock as he usually did. The plains stretched endlessly, dotted with small hills and scattered patches of trees. As he moved through the tall grass, he noticed something unusual. A faint, irregular movement near the edge of a small wooded area. At first he thought it might be a deer or a coyote, but the movement seemed deliberate, almost human. Curiosity and concern made him ride closer, his senses alert. As he approached, he could hear faint sounds of struggle, a low, muffled cry for help. His heart quickened. He dismounted and tied his horse to a tree, quietly moving toward the source of the sound. The closer he got, the more he realized this was no ordinary animal. There in a small clearing, a young woman was bound with ropes and guarded by two rough-looking men. Their faces were hard, and they paid no attention to the rancher's sudden appearance. He felt a surge of anger. No one had the right to treat another human being this way. The rancher stayed hidden for a moment, assessing the situation. He was alone, outnumbered, and the men were armed. Yet he could not turn away. His hands tightened on the handle of the rifle he carried. Slowly he stepped forward, keeping his voice calm but firm. "Let her go," he commanded. The men turned, startled by the sudden appearance of someone so fearless. One of them sneered, thinking this solitary rancher was an easy threat. But before they could react, he fired a warning shot into the ground, the sound echoing across the clearing. The young woman looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes, hope flickering where there had been despair. The men hesitated. The rancher used the moment, moving quickly, using the element of surprise to his advantage. A struggle followed, tense and fast. He managed to disarm one of the men, forcing him to retreat. The other ran, leaving the woman alone but still bound. The rancher quickly untied her ropes, careful not to hurt her. She rubbed her wrists, her eyes wary, watching him as if expecting a trap. "Are you hurt?" he asked gently. She shook her head, too stunned to speak. For a moment, there was only the sound of the wind and the rustling of the grass. Finally, she found her voice, speaking softly in a language he did not understand at first. But her meaning was clear. She was grateful, though cautious. The rancher realized that trust would not come quickly, and he would have to prove he meant no harm. He offered her water from his canteen, and she accepted, taking small sips while keeping her eyes on him. He did not try to push conversation, knowing that patience was necessary. She needed to feel safe. As they moved toward the ranch, the young woman's gaze remained sharp, assessing every step he took. She was tall and strong for her age, her features marked by both hardship and resilience. Despite the ropes that had bound her earlier, there was a quiet dignity in the way she carried herself. The rancher felt a deep respect for her courage. He realized that saving her was only the beginning. Now he had to ensure her safety, and that meant careful planning and thought. The ride back was slow. The rancher led his horse, guiding the woman who walked beside him. The plains were vast and empty, and the sun climbed higher, making the journey tiring. Yet there was a strange calm in the air. Neither spoke much, but each understood the silent acknowledgement of survival. The woman's eyes occasionally darted to the horizon, alert to any danger, while the rancher kept his hand near his rifle, watching for threats. They were an unlikely pair, bound together by circumstance and the shared experience of fear and courage. As the ranch came into view, she stopped for a moment, taking in the simple wooden fences and the small barn. It was a world very different from what she had known in captivity. The rancher gestured for her to follow him, and she did, her steps careful but steady. Once inside the safety of the fenced land, he showed her where she could rest and offered her food. She accepted silently, still unsure of what to make of this man who had risked his life for her, without question. After a while, she spoke again, this time in words the rancher could understand. Her voice was quiet but firm. "You will be my husband," she said. The rancher froze, taken aback. The statement was unexpected, almost shocking. He had rescued her, yes, but marriage had never crossed his mind. He looked at her, unsure how to respond. She met his gaze steadily, as if there were no room for doubt in her mind. For her, the promise had been made long before, perhaps as a way to claim some sense of control over her uncertain fate. He laughed softly, a mix of surprise and disbelief, but he did not dismiss her. Instead, he simply nodded, understanding that trust and safety had to come first before anything else. The woman seemed to sense that her words had startled him, but she did not retract them. In her culture, actions and words carried weight, and perhaps this declaration was a reflection of her gratitude and the bond she felt forming, even in such a short time. The rancher realized that there was more to her than meets the eye. She was strong, intelligent, and determined, and she had faced dangers he could hardly imagine. That evening, the rancher built a fire outside the small cabin where she was resting. The smell of smoke mingled with the scent of the plains, and the soft crackle of flames filled the quiet night. He sat nearby, keeping watch, knowing that even now, threats could appear at any time. The woman watched him silently, her eyes reflecting the firelight, and he could see both fear and resilience in her gaze. It was a delicate balance. She needed protection, but she also needed her independence. He respected that, and in turn she began to see that he was different from those who had held her captive. As the night deepened, they shared little more than gestures and cautious glances, yet an unspoken understanding grew. The rancher knew that he could not force her trust, but his actions spoke louder than words. For her part, she began to see that not all men in this vast, unforgiving land were cruel. The bond that had begun in a moment of danger was taking root in silence, in shared space, and in the quiet acknowledgement of mutual respect. It was fragile, but it was real. By the time the first stars appeared in the sky, the rancher felt a sense of calm he had not known in years. The plains were still vast and empty, but for the first time he did not feel alone. The young woman had survived horrors he could not imagine, and now she was here, alive and safe. Her presence was a reminder of both the fragility and strength of life on the frontier. He resolved silently to protect her, not just from immediate danger, but from the harshness of a world that could be unforgiving. And so, under the vast night sky, a new chapter began, one born from courage, trust, and a daring rescue. The rancher did not yet understand the weight of her words, but he knew that the life ahead would be changed forever. In the quiet of the plains, the firelight flickered, and two lives, once separate, had begun to intertwine in ways neither could yet fully comprehend. The next morning, the rancher rose early as usual, the cold air brushing against his face as he stepped outside. The sun was just starting to paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the wind carried the soft smell of earth and dew. The young woman he had rescued sat near the cabin, wrapped in a simple blanket. She had slept quietly through the night, and now her eyes were alert, studying everything around her. She did not speak at first, but the rancher could sense she was taking in the sight of the ranch, trying to understand this new life she had entered. He approached her slowly, keeping his voice calm. "You need to eat," he said, gesturing to the small table he had set with bread, cheese, and some fruit. She nodded, still silent, and began to eat with careful, measured movements. The rancher watched her, realizing that trust was not built with words alone. It had to grow through patience and understanding. He did not push her to talk, knowing that she would open up when she was ready. After breakfast, he showed her around the ranch. They walked past the barns where horses stamped their hooves, and the smell of hay was strong. He pointed out the fences that marked the edges of the property, the water troughs, and the pens where cattle were kept. She listened quietly, nodding occasionally, and sometimes asking questions in her soft voice. Though she spoke a language different from his own, he could understand her meaning through gestures and the tone of her words. As they moved toward the far fields, he noticed how carefully she observed the land. Her eyes scanned the ground, the trees, the movements of birds and animals. There was a knowledge there that he did not have, an instinct for the land that came from her own experience. He realized that she was not only brave but also skilled in ways that could help him on the ranch. Yet he knew he must be careful not to overwhelm her or make her feel as if she owed him anything. Respect was important, and he wanted her to feel safe and free. By midday, the sun was high, beating down with warmth that made the air shimmer. They rested under the shade of a small oak tree, drinking water and letting their horses graze nearby. The woman finally spoke more clearly, telling him small pieces of her story. She had been captured months ago by men who saw her as nothing more than a prize. She had resisted as best she could, hiding her strength and cleverness from them. Her voice was calm, but there was an underlying edge of pain. A rancher listened, never interrupting, simply offering a presence that said he believed her and that she was safe now. The conversation was slow, difficult at times, but it built a connection between them. He realized how resilient she was, how much she had endured and survived. He felt both admiration and responsibility, knowing that he had not only freed her, but now had to help her heal from the experience. For her part, she began to see that he was different from the men who had held her captive. He was patient, gentle, and careful not to rush her or take advantage of her trust. Slowly, a bond began to grow, built on respect and shared experiences rather than words alone. As the afternoon passed, they encountered the first challenge of their journey back to the ranch. A narrow creek, swollen from recent rains, blocked their path. The water ran fast, its surface churning with small waves. She hesitated, her eyes narrowing as she considered the crossing. The rancher offered his hand, guiding her carefully across the slippery stones. She took it, trusting him, and stepped cautiously from one stone to another. Once they reached the other side, she gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. It was the first sign that she was beginning to rely on him, if only a little. The rest of the journey was not easy. The plains were open and exposed, and the sun grew hotter with every mile. There were moments when the wind carried distant sounds that made them tense, and the rancher kept his hand close to his rifle, scanning the horizon for any sign of danger. The woman moved quietly beside him, her movements precise and careful. She showed him how to spot small tracks in the dirt, how to notice changes in the wind that might signal trouble, and how to conserve energy and water during long walks. He was impressed by her knowledge, and he began to see her not as a helpless captive, but as a strong and capable person. By evening, they had nearly reached the ranch, but the landscape began to change. The hills grew steeper and the sun sank low, casting long shadows that stretched across the ground. The rancher could feel the tension in the air, knowing that any misstep could lead to injury or worse. He guided the woman carefully, encouraging her when she faltered and giving her space when she needed it. She responded with quiet determination, her confidence growing with each step. It was clear that she would not remain passive. She had survived too much to rely entirely on anyone else. When they finally arrived at the ranch, the sky was painted in deep reds and purples, and the first stars were beginning to appear. The woman stopped at the edge of the fence, taking in the sight of the homestead, the barns, and the small fields that stretched before them. The rancher dismounted and led his horse to the stable, then turned to her. "You're safe now," he said simply. She nodded, and for the first time she did not speak. She simply let herself relax, leaning slightly against the fence and watching the ranch. That night, as the rancher built a fire outside the cabin, the woman sat quietly nearby, her eyes reflecting the flames. They ate a simple meal together, sharing bread and dried meat, and she began to feel a small sense of normalcy for the first time in months. The rancher spoke little, respecting her silence, but his actions conveyed patience and care. He kept watch throughout the night, knowing that threats could come at any time, but also understanding that she needed rest and reassurance. The quiet crackle of the fire became a symbol of safety, a small anchor in a world that had been harsh and unpredictable. As they sat together, the woman finally spoke again. Her words were clear this time, no longer a whisper, no longer tentative. "You will be my husband," she said. The rancher blinked, surprised, unsure how to respond. Her voice was steady, her eyes unwavering, and there was a seriousness in her tone that made him pause. He realized that this was not a casual statement, but a reflection of her own way of seeking security and connection after so much danger. Though he had never imagined marriage in that moment, he understood the importance of her words. They were a promise, not just of gratitude, but of something deeper that she felt in her heart. The rancher did not answer immediately. Instead, he simply nodded, allowing her words to exist without judgment or pressure. He realized that trust and safety had to come first, and that only with time could deeper connections grow. The woman seemed to sense his understanding, and though she did not smile, her posture relaxed slightly. There was a quiet bond forming between them, fragile but real. It was built on shared experience, mutual respect, and the understanding that each had faced dangers and survived. Through the night, the two remained near the fire, the rancher keeping a careful watch while she rested. The wind whispered across the plains, carrying the soft sounds of distant animals and the faint rustle of trees. The woman's breathing grew steady, and the rancher felt a sense of calm he had not known in years. He knew that the path ahead would not be easy. Life on the frontier was harsh, and the world outside the safety of the ranch could be cruel. Yet for the first time, he did not feel alone. The young woman had survived horrors that would have broken many, and now she was here, alive and trusting him in her own way. By the time the first light of dawn touched the plains, a new understanding had settled between them. The rancher had learned that courage was not measured by strength alone, but by the choices one makes in the face of danger. The woman had learned that trust could exist, even in a world that had taught her fear. Together, they had taken the first steps in a journey that would challenge them, test their patience, and require both resilience and care. The day had begun as any other, with work to do and challenges to face, but by nightfall both had been changed forever by an act of bravery and the quiet acknowledgement of an unspoken promise. Life at the ranch slowly began to settle into a new rhythm. The rancher and the young woman moved cautiously, learning to share space, tasks, and routines. Each morning he would rise before sunrise, tending to the animals while the plains were still cool and the light soft. She followed, at first hesitant, unsure of what was expected of her, but soon began helping in small ways, carrying water, feeding the chickens, and collecting firewood. Her movements were careful and precise, showing the skills she had developed over years of surviving in the wild. The rancher watched her quietly, noting her strength and patience, understanding that trust was being built not through words alone, but through these shared efforts. He taught her the ways of the ranch, how to mend fences, check the water troughs, and guide the cattle from one field to another. She observed closely, asking questions in her quiet voice, learning quickly but always on her own terms. Sometimes she would smile softly when she succeeded, and he would offer a nod of approval. He never forced her to act or speak. Instead, he gave her space, understanding that respect was more important than authority. Slowly, a mutual understanding grew between them, an unspoken agreement that each was capable, strong, and deserving of dignity. Their days were filled with hard work and small victories. She showed him how to read the land in ways he had never considered, how to spot signs of predators, where water might be hidden beneath the dry soil, and which plants could be used for medicine or food. He realized that her knowledge was not just practical but essential. The more he saw her skill, the more he respected her, and the more she began to feel a sense of belonging she had not felt since before her capture. In the quiet moments, she began to see the ranch as a place of safety, a space where she could recover, learn, and begin again. The evenings were often quiet. After a long day of work, the rancher would sit outside, cleaning his tools or mending equipment, while she sat nearby, sometimes weaving small baskets or simply watching the sky. The silence was comfortable, a rare thing in a world filled with noise and danger. Occasionally they would speak, exchanging stories of their pasts, though she remained careful with her words. She told him small fragments of her life before capture, how she had grown up among her people, learned the ways of the land, and developed the skills that had kept her alive. He listened, never interrupting, offering a steady presence that allowed her to open up in her own time. One afternoon, as they worked together mending a broken fence, the rancher noticed how deftly she handled the tools. Her hands were steady and strong, and she moved with a grace that came from years of necessity. "You are very skilled," he said, genuinely impressed. "Ah?" She looked at him, her eyes meeting his briefly, and nodded. There was no arrogance in her response, only a quiet pride. He realized that her confidence had been hidden beneath layers of fear and suffering, and now, in this safe place, it was beginning to surface. The young woman also began to notice the qualities of the rancher. She saw how he treated the land, the animals, and her with respect and care. He did not demand her gratitude, nor did he act superior. He simply acted with integrity, and that consistency allowed her to feel secure. For the first time in a long while, she began to trust someone fully, not because she had to, but because she chose to. Trust, she realized, was not given lightly, and she had survived long enough to know the value of someone who truly deserved it. Yet life at the ranch was not without challenges. The local community, curious and sometimes suspicious, began to take notice of the young woman. Whispers spread through the nearby town about the solitary rancher and the woman living with him. Some questioned her presence, while others speculated on the nature of their relationship. The rancher, aware of these rumors, did not ignore them, but he also did not allow them to dictate his actions. He treated the woman as an equal and defended her quietly but firmly when others questioned her. This steadfastness further earned her respect and reinforced the growing bond between them. As weeks passed, they faced moments that tested their developing trust. One afternoon, a sudden storm swept across the plains. Dark clouds rolled in, heavy with rain, and the wind picked up, threatening to tear down the fences and scatter the cattle. The rancher acted quickly, securing the animals and gathering tools and supplies to prevent damage. The young woman worked alongside him, her movements quick and confident despite the storm. Together, they managed to save most of the cattle and secure the property. By the time the storm passed, both were soaked and exhausted, but there was a shared sense of accomplishment. They had faced a challenge together and emerged stronger, their reliance on one another deepening. During quieter moments, the young woman reflected on her own growth. She had arrived at the ranch cautious and wary, unsure of what the future might hold. Now she found herself laughing softly at small jokes the rancher made, helping with tasks without being told, and even sharing glimpses of her past that she had kept private. She began to see the ranch not just as a place of safety, but as a home where she could build a life. Her words from the day she was rescued, "You will be my husband," remained in the back of her mind, not as a demand, but as a reflection of the bond she was beginning to feel. The rancher, too, began to feel changes within himself. He had spent years in solitude, believing that life on the frontier was best lived alone. Yet, as he watched the young woman navigate the challenges of the ranch, he realized how much her presence had enriched his life. Her strength, resilience, and insight complemented his own abilities, creating a partnership built on mutual respect rather than necessity. He began to imagine a future that included her, not out of obligation, but because he valued her companionship and admired her courage. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the two sat together near the fire. The rancher spoke softly about his own past, about the long hours, the loneliness, and the responsibilities of managing the ranch. She listened attentively, occasionally asking questions or sharing small observations. Their conversation flowed naturally, a sign that trust and understanding had deepened. The young woman felt a sense of comfort she had not experienced in years, knowing that this man genuinely cared for her well-being and respected her as an equal. As the stars appeared in the night sky, they shared a quiet moment of reflection. The young woman realized that the world outside the ranch could be harsh and unpredictable, but here she had found a space where she could heal, grow, and be herself. The rancher recognized that he had found a companion whose presence brought both strength and warmth to his life. Their bond, once fragile and tentative, had begun to solidify into a partnership built on shared experiences, respect, and understanding. Life at the ranch continued in this way, a balance of work, learning, and quiet companionship. The young woman grew stronger and more confident each day, her skills and insight becoming an invaluable part of the ranch's daily life. The rancher, in turn, found satisfaction in sharing his knowledge and witnessing her growth. Together they faced the challenges of frontier life, learning from one another and building a bond that was both practical and deeply personal. By the end of the month, a sense of normalcy had settled over the ranch. The young woman moved with ease through the routines of the day, and the rancher felt a growing sense of pride and admiration for her. The initial tension and uncertainty that had marked their early days were replaced by mutual respect, trust, and a quiet understanding of each other's strengths. Their lives, once separate and solitary, had begun to intertwine in ways that neither could have anticipated. Though the world outside remained unpredictable, the ranch had become a sanctuary, a place where courage, patience, and resilience were valued above all else. The bond between the rancher and the young woman continued to grow, unspoken but undeniable, laying the foundation for the challenges and triumphs yet to come. Together they faced each day with determination, knowing that survival, trust, and companionship were the true measures of life on the frontier. Life on the ranch had settled into a rhythm, but the calm was fragile. The plains were wide and beautiful, yet they held dangers that could appear without warning. The rancher had always known this, and the young woman he had rescued now understood it as well. One morning, as the sun rose low over the horizon, casting a soft golden light across the fields, the rancher noticed signs that troubled him. Small tracks in the dirt suggested that someone had passed through the land recently. His instincts told him that the past was returning to test them. He studied the tracks carefully, noting the prints and the direction they had taken. The woman watched him quietly, sensing the change in his demeanor. She had learned to read the land in her own way, and she could see the tension in his posture. "Trouble?" she asked softly. He nodded, his jaw tight. "Could be," he said. "We need to be careful." The warning was subtle, but she understood. She had survived before, and survival required vigilance, courage, and quick thinking. The day passed with an undercurrent of tension. They worked together, tending to the animals and checking fences, but both were aware that someone, or some people, might be nearby. The rancher remained alert, his hand never far from his rifle, while the woman moved with quiet efficiency, keeping an eye on the surroundings. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of smoke from a distant fire, and both of them paused, listening carefully. Every sound, every movement could signal danger. As afternoon came, the threat became clear. A small group of men appeared on the ridge overlooking the ranch. Their faces were hard and unwelcoming, and their intent was unmistakable. The rancher recognized some of them as the same men who had held the woman captive months earlier. They had returned, likely seeking revenge or attempting to reclaim her. The rancher felt a surge of determination. He would not allow them to harm her. Not now. Not ever. He quickly assessed the situation, noting their numbers and the positions they were taking. The woman stood beside him, calm but ready. She had faced danger before and knew that fear would not help them now. Together, they moved strategically, using the terrain to their advantage. The rancher instructed her to stay behind cover while he created a diversion, drawing the men's attention. She obeyed without question, her eyes sharp and alert. It was a dangerous situation, but they had both learned to act with precision and clarity under pressure. The standoff was tense. Dust rose from the dry plains as the men advanced, unaware of the careful planning happening before them. The rancher used his knowledge of the land to anticipate their movements, positioning himself and the woman in ways that gave them the best chance of defense. When the men drew closer, the woman used her skills to create small obstacles, rolling rocks, shifting debris, to slow their approach. Each action was calculated, precise, and effective. The men began to realize that this would not be an easy target. A confrontation finally occurred near the edge of the ranch. The men attempted to force their way in, but the rancher and the woman were ready. He moved quickly, blocking their path and using his rifle to keep them at bay. The woman, agile and brave, worked alongside him, using her knowledge of the land to outmaneuver them. There was no reckless fighting, no unnecessary risk, only careful, deliberate actions to protect themselves and the ranch. The outlaws soon realized that they were facing not one person but two who were skilled, determined, and unyielding. Hours passed in careful maneuvers and tense standoffs. The rancher and the woman remained vigilant, knowing that a single mistake could be costly. Gradually, their opponents began to retreat, realizing that the ranch was not easily taken. The young woman's courage and resourcefulness had been crucial, and the rancher acknowledged this silently. For the first time since their arrival, she felt a sense of accomplishment beyond mere survival. They had not only protected themselves, but had done so with intelligence and skill. Once the danger had passed and the outlaws had fled beyond sight, the rancher and the woman took a moment to breathe. The tension in their bodies slowly eased, replaced by a quiet relief. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the plains. They looked at each other, understanding without words that this ordeal had changed something between them. The woman's earlier words, "You will be my husband," resonated now in a deeper way. She had seen his courage, his care, and his unwavering determination to protect her. In turn, he had seen her strength, intelligence, and resilience in a way he could not ignore. That evening, they worked together to repair any damage caused during the confrontation. Fences were mended, animals checked, and supplies secured. They moved efficiently, their actions reflecting the trust and coordination that had developed over weeks of working and living together. Each gesture, each shared task, reinforced the bond that had begun quietly, but now grew stronger under the strain of adversity. They were partners in the truest sense, relying on one another's skills and instincts to maintain safety and stability. As night fell, the rancher built a fire outside the cabin, the warm light casting dancing shadows across the ground. The woman sat near him, her posture relaxed but alert, a quiet smile on her face. They shared a simple meal, exchanging few words, but the understanding between them was palpable. Both knew that survival on the frontier required courage, strategy, and unity. They had faced a real threat together and had emerged not just unharmed, but stronger as a team. In the quiet hours of the night, they talked more openly than they had in weeks. The woman shared small stories from her childhood, of the ways her people survived on the land, their customs, and the lessons she had learned. The rancher listened, fascinated and respectful, gaining insight into her perspective and the experiences that had shaped her. In turn, he shared stories of his own life on the ranch, the solitude, the challenges, and the moments of quiet triumph. Their conversation flowed naturally, building a connection rooted in respect, experience, and shared endurance. For the first time, the woman felt a true sense of partnership. She had survived captivity and danger, but here, with the rancher, she had found a place where her strength was recognized and valued. She realized that the bond between them was no longer just about survival. It was about trust, understanding, and a shared commitment to protect and support one another. The phrase she had spoken months ago, "You will be my husband," now held more weight, reflecting not only her hope, but also the reality of the connection that had grown between them. The rancher, too, felt a shift within himself. He had always believed that life on the frontier was best faced alone, but the events of the day had shown him the value of partnership and mutual support. He admired her courage, intelligence, and steadfastness, and he recognized that their connection went beyond mere circumstance. In the quiet glow of the fire, he allowed himself to imagine a future where they faced challenges together, side by side, not as savior and rescued, but as equals and companions. As the night deepened and the stars appeared over the vast plains, a sense of calm returned to the ranch. The wind whispered softly, carrying the scents of earth and grass, and the fire crackled gently. Both the rancher and the woman sat in reflective silence, aware that the world outside could be unpredictable, but confident that together they could face whatever came. The bond forged in danger had been tested and proven, and now it became a foundation for trust, courage, and a shared life ahead. By dawn, a quiet understanding had settled over them. The threat from the outlaws had passed, at least for now, but the lessons remained. Life on the frontier was harsh and unpredictable, yet within the safety of the ranch and the companionship they had formed, there was hope, resilience, and strength. The young woman no longer saw herself as merely rescued. She was a partner, capable and valued. The rancher no longer saw himself as solitary. He had found someone whose presence strengthened and enriched his life. And so, under the wide, endless sky of the plains, they continued their lives. Each task, each challenge, and each quiet moment built upon the bond that had begun in danger and trust. The days ahead would not be easy. but they had proven that together they could face adversity, protect one another, and grow in ways neither had anticipated. The ranch, once a place of routine work and solitude, had become a home, a sanctuary, and the stage for a partnership grounded in courage, respect, and the promise of a shared future. The morning sun rose slowly over the ranch, casting long shadows across the fields and bathing the land in a warm, golden light. The air was crisp and fresh, carrying the scent of grass and earth, and the sound of animals beginning their day filled the quiet. The rancher and the young woman had woken early, as they usually did, each moving through their routines with a sense of purpose and calm. After the recent threats, life had returned to a quieter rhythm, but both knew that the plains could be unpredictable. Still, there was a sense of peace that neither had felt in a long time, a feeling that, at least for now, the ranch and their lives were safe. They worked side by side, tending to the animals and repairing fences, their movements in sync from weeks of shared labor. The woman's confidence had grown. She handled the horses, fed the livestock, and even guided the cattle with a skill and ease that impressed the rancher daily. He, in turn, had come to rely on her not only as a helper, but as a partner in managing the ranch. Their trust in each other had deepened, built on months of survival, work, and quiet companionship. There was a sense now that they faced life together, not merely as rescuer and rescued, but as equals, bound by experience and mutual respect. As the day progressed, they took a break near the edge of the property, overlooking the plains. The woman sat quietly, her eyes scanning the horizon as she often did, a habit from her life before captivity. The rancher brought her a cup of water, and she accepted it with a small nod of thanks. For a moment, they simply watched the world around them. The gentle sway of grass, the distant mountains, the quiet rustle of animals moving about. It was a rare moment of serenity, a chance to reflect on how far they had come. The woman finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. "I am glad to be here," she said in words the rancher could understand. He nodded, knowing that her gratitude went beyond mere words. "You are safe," he replied. "And this is your home now, if you want it to be?" She looked at him, her gaze steady, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself a small smile. The promise she had made the day he rescued her, "You will be my husband," was no longer just a declaration. It had become a reflection of the trust and bond that had grown between them. Life on the ranch continued in this peaceful rhythm, but the days were not without work. They repaired fences damaged by storms, guided the cattle through the pastures, and maintained the barns and equipment. The woman's knowledge of the land proved invaluable, and the rancher came to rely on her insights more and more. In turn, he taught her skills she had not yet mastered, such as maintaining the water pumps, tracking the weather for changes, and managing the herd during long days in the sun. Their partnership was a balance of learning, teaching, and shared responsibility, each contributing to the life they were building together. One afternoon, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, they faced a challenge that tested their skills and coordination. A sudden illness had struck one of the cows, and it was clear that immediate care was necessary. The rancher worked quickly, keeping the animal calm while the woman prepared herbal remedies and administered them with care. Together, they worked with precision and patience, ensuring the cow's recovery. By evening, the animal was stable, and a sense of relief and accomplishment settled over them. It was a reminder that life on the frontier demanded courage, teamwork, and practical knowledge, and that together they were capable of meeting these challenges. As the days turned into weeks, their bond strengthened in quiet, meaningful ways. They shared meals, stories, and moments of reflection. The woman spoke of her childhood among her people, the lessons she had learned, and the traditions that had shaped her. The rancher shared his own experiences of solitude, work, and the challenges of maintaining the ranch. These conversations, though simple, deepened their understanding of one another. Each story, each shared memory, was a thread weaving them closer together, creating a connection rooted in respect, trust, and mutual care. One evening, as the stars began to appear in the night sky, the rancher and the woman sat outside near the fire. The air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and grass, and the distant sounds of animals moving about filled the silence. The woman spoke softly, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "I never thought I would find a place like this," she said, "a place where I could feel safe and strong again." The rancher nodded, understanding the depth of her words. "You are strong," he replied, "and you have made this place stronger just by being here." The quiet bond between them had become undeniable. The promise she had made months ago was no longer just a statement of intent. It was a reflection of a relationship that had grown naturally through shared experiences, trust, and respect. The rancher realized that he had come to rely on her not only for practical help, but for companionship and emotional strength. In turn, she saw him as someone who valued her, respected her, and would stand by her through any challenge. Their partnership had grown into something more than either could have anticipated, an equal, committed, and supportive bond. As the night deepened, they continued to sit by the fire, talking quietly and sharing small observations about the land, the animals, and the rhythms of life. There was no need for grand declarations. Their connection was evident in the way they worked together, communicated, and protected one another. The rancher felt a sense of peace he had not known in years. He had faced the dangers of the plains, the isolation of the frontier, and the hardships of daily work. But now he faced life with someone whose presence made the burdens lighter and the joys more meaningful. Over time, the woman became an integral part of the ranch. She moved through the daily routines with confidence and grace, managing tasks with skill and efficiency. The rancher watched her with pride, not just for her abilities, but for the courage and resilience she had shown since the day he rescued her. Their relationship had grown beyond the initial act of bravery and gratitude. It had become a partnership built on shared experiences, trust, and a deep understanding of each other's strengths and values. The turning point came one evening when they were both resting after a long day of work. The woman spoke quietly, almost hesitantly, but with determination. "I want to stay," she said. "I want to be here, with you." The rancher looked at her, his heart swelling with understanding and gratitude. He realized that the bond they had formed, the trust, respect, and care, had evolved into something permanent and meaningful. Without hesitation, he replied, "Then stay. This is your home, and you are my partner." The woman's smile was small but genuine, a reflection of relief, happiness, and the sense of belonging she had longed for. In that moment, the promise of the past, the words she had spoken when he first rescued her, was fulfilled not by obligation, but by choice and mutual respect. Their bond, forged in danger, strengthened by trust and nurtured by daily life, had grown into a true partnership. They faced the world together, no longer as rescuer and rescued, but as equals, companions and partners in life. The final days at the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. The rancher and the woman worked, laughed, and shared quiet moments of reflection. They faced challenges together, navigated the harshness of frontier life, and celebrated small victories, from a healthy herd to a repaired fence. Their lives, once separate and uncertain, had become intertwined in ways neither could have imagined. The ranch had become a home, a sanctuary, and a place where courage, trust, and partnership thrived. As the sun set on another day, they stood together on the porch of the cabin, looking out over the fields and the cattle grazing peacefully. The wind carried the scent of earth and grass, and the sky glowed with warm colors. They stood side by side, their hands occasionally brushing, sharing a quiet understanding that spoke louder than words. Life on the frontier remained challenging, but now they faced it together, strengthened by the bond that had grown from a single act of courage and a promise made in a moment of gratitude. The story of the rancher and the young woman became one of hope, trust, and resilience. From the day he had freed her from captivity, through the challenges of daily life and external threats, they had built a partnership grounded in mutual respect and care. They had proven that courage, patience, and understanding could overcome fear, adversity, and uncertainty. In each other, they had found not only survival but companionship, strength, and the possibility of a shared life filled with purpose and dignity. And so, as the stars appeared over the wide plains and the quiet of the night settled over the rancher and the woman stood together, aware of the hardships that lay ahead, but confident that they could face them. Their lives, once separate, had become a story of trust, resilience, and shared courage, a story of two people who had found one another in the vastness of the frontier, and in doing so had discovered the strength, companionship, and hope that would guide them through all the days to come.